Well, we're here in Burbank today looking at an air compressor that doesn't make pressure anymore. The symptoms here seem to be something is disconnected inside. Listen to what this sounds like when I turn it on. Yeah, it just hums. It doesn't, you don't hear the compressor running, so it sounds like the motor somehow is disconnected from the compressor. So we're going to take it apart. I've already loosened up these bolts. To get this one off, by the way, this one right here, I had to remove this coupling because I couldn't get a wrench in there. Also couldn't find the right size socket, but we were able to get it off with a small crescent wrench. But I've got it off. I think these are 10 or 11 millimeters, but of course it didn't have a 10 or 11 millimeter socket. So I had to kind of work it out with one of these little crescent wrenches. It was pretty tight in here, but I was able to get them, and once you get them loose they come right out with your fingers. So we're going to take our first look at what's underneath this cover and hope it gives us a clue. Oh boy. We've gotten the cover off our portable compressor and taking a look inside. One important thing, I forgot to unplug this, so once I got that cover open I realized I had hot wires in here, and at least I was smart enough to get it unplugged before I shocked myself. So make sure you got it unplugged before you go working on this. I haven't touched anything. Let's take a walk around, see if we can figure out what's going on. That looks like a fan right there, just a blower fan to keep something cool. But what I don't see is here's the compressor on top, the motor right here. And the motor is driven by something underneath this housing, maybe a gear. But something isn't driving this compressor. I guess I'm going to have to plug it in and see if I can see anything going on. That's really all there is to it. There are some fuses right there. I can't imagine those being bad, but I will check those before I go any further. That is some kind of a ventilation fan right there. I can spin it. It's separately powered by AC. Alright, I pulled this fuse out and verified that it in fact is okay. That's the main fuse, and without that nothing operates. This in fact is a fan, a ventilation fan, apparently to keep the air moving through the unit out the louvers in the back of the cover here. Probably draws air in the front and out the back to keep the motor cool. Now I verified by putting the power on it that in fact this fan operates, it turns, and so does this motor. But the compressor doesn't operate because apparently whatever's down in here probably gears, and they may be plastic gears that are broken. I'm not sure whether they're going to go that far or not, but it looks like our problem is the drive mechanism underneath the compressor itself. Now I decided that I would take the motor here. There's two screws in the end of it, and I carefully removed them and then wiggled the motor enough to break it loose from this housing right here, and then slid it back very slowly. Now I didn't hear anything move as I did that, but you'll see I stopped right there so I could take some pictures of what I see here, and it's kind of what I suspected. The connection between the motor and the compressor is shot. I don't know whether you can see that or not. This is some kind of a wobble bearing, an eccentric I guess you'd call it. Down on the bottom there you'll see what's left of some ball bearings and it was a bearing with ball bearings in it, and apparently it rode on this eccentric that's off-center on the motor shaft and connected with the compressor push arm that's back up inside here. It's pretty dark in there, but there's like a push rod on a piston that as that eccentric goes back and forth, it pushes the piston that's up in this housing up and down, causes the pressure and pressurizes the tank. We're back in Burbank here, and we're with our Taskforce air compressor that we've taken apart. I moved out into the sunshine. Too hot to work in the sunshine, but it sure helps see what you're looking at a little bit better. Here is the business end of the motor, which is a off-center drive. That looks like some sort of a inside of a bearing that rides on a bearing that's pushed into the crankshaft, which I'm going to have to tip this, but here are the remnants of it. just a washer. Looks like the edge of a bearing, but some ball bearings are falling out here. They're not of any use, but I'll collect them so you can see some of them down here in the bottom. I'm going to tip this up so you can see the inside. Now I've taken the motor out of the compressor here, and I've turned it around so we could see the business end. As you can see here, the drive shaft is this piece is off center. So when it goes around, it essentially goes up and down. And on this piece was a bearing, and all that's left of that is the pieces in this little bucket here. That bearing was attached to this piston, which I pulled out of the housing by sticking my finger up in here. But this piston goes up and down in here. In the top of it, I found the reed valve right there. That seals on the upstroke, gives you pressure, and on the downstroke acts like an intake valve. So just very simple up and down motion. That's done by being attached to this, and as that goes around, this thing goes like this and does the pumping motion. So the problem is the bearing disintegrated, and you can see that it chewed this thing up a little bit, but it looks usable if we could find the right bearing to go in there and figure out how to put it in. Looks like it may be pressed in or snapped in with some rings, and we could put it back together and actually get it operating. But right now, without that bearing, we're out of business. Came into the computer and did a search. As you can see in the search bar there, I searched on Taskforce Air Compressor 83691 parts, and I got all kinds of hits. The one I've chosen is the one right down here, this owner's manual. Let's go see what that says. And in fact, it is an owner's manual, and it's quite lengthy, but I've already looked at this and see that I think what we want is something, the exploded parts diagram on page 8. Of course, I can't click there, so I'm going to have to run out to page 8 manually here. 6, here's page 8. And right here is our piston, right there, item 6. Here's the bearing, item 7. And there's the eccentric that goes on the motor shaft, is item 5. I know we need this bearing, not sure if we need a new one of these or not, but my search ended with going down here, and here are the items we want. There's the connecting rod for the piston. Here's number 7 is the bearing, and you'll notice there's no part number in the part number field. And what I keep finding every place I go and look is that if there's no part number in there, like there is in these items over here, it's no longer available. And it's at the manufacturer or Sears or any of the places I go. I have had no luck finding the bearing, the eccentric, which is the eccentric is up here, item 5. No part number, no connecting rod, bearing, piston. The whole inside of the compressor is unavailable. Only a few parts over here. I think there's about 6 with part numbers, plastic shrouds and on-off switches, things that you could probably work around. So I'm afraid the answer here is that we're out of business. Unless we could somehow measure the bearing or the inside of the piston connecting rod and somehow be lucky enough to find the right bearing, I think it's time to give up on this Taskforce air compressor. That's it for now.